They laughed at her like trash, but he saw her as a treasure. In school, children ran in groups, laughing loudly, forming bonds that she could never quite grasp. She often sat alone on the edge of the playground, her small hands folded neatly on her lap, watching as others played games she did not know the rules of. Sometimes they invited her to join, but the invitation came with laughter that stung more than any rejection. She could see it in their eyes, the way they whispered to each other and then pointed at her. Even when the words weren't cruel, the tone made her feel small, like a leaf blown aside by the wind, unnoticed and unimportant. Her home was modest, warm in its own way, but it offered no escape from the loneliness that followed her every day. She had a mother who worked long hours at a small shop, a mother who loved her fiercely, but was often too tired to understand the depth of her sadness. And she had a father who had left long ago, leaving behind only distant memories and unanswered questions. These absences were not unusual in her town, but they left a quiet hole in her heart, one that seemed to echo every time she was mocked or ignored. School corridors were her most difficult challenge. The walls were covered in bright posters about achievements, celebrations, and happiness, but for her, they were reminders of what she could never be. Every time she walked through them, she felt a million eyes tracing her, judging her. The other children whispered as she passed, sometimes calling her names that were meant to hurt. Weird, they said. Ugly, others whispered behind her back. She tried not to listen, tried to tell herself that they were wrong, but the words burrowed into her mind, planting seeds of doubt and sadness. She often wondered why being quiet, kind, or different made her a target. Despite all this, she had a heart that refused to harden. She noticed things others overlooked. When a bird struggled to free itself from a tangle of string in the playground, she would rush to help, ignoring the laughter of those who thought she was silly. When a classmate dropped a book, she would pick it up and hand it back with a shy smile, though many would walk by pretending not to see. These small gestures went unnoticed, or worse, were ridiculed. Yet she continued because deep down she believed that kindness was never a mistake, even if the world didn't reward it. Her teachers, though well-meaning, sometimes missed the subtle signs of her struggle. They saw her as quiet, obedient, and unremarkable. They praised her for following instructions but never realized that inside she carried a storm of feelings. She often wrote in a small notebook, words and stories no one else would read. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could be brave, clever, and free. Her writing was her escape, her secret world where she could imagine herself being understood, admired, and appreciated. Weekends offered a brief respite, but even then, the sense of being an outsider lingered. She would wander through the small streets of her town, watching families enjoy picnics, children playing with their friends, and neighbors chatting happily. She longed to be part of that world, to laugh freely, to feel accepted, but she always felt a step removed, as though an invisible barrier separated her from the joy others took for granted. She often carried a small stone in her pocket, a habit she had since childhood. She called it her lucky stone, a tiny piece of the earth that reminded her she existed, that she mattered, even if the world around her tried to convince her otherwise. Her appearance, though simple and unassuming, became another reason for ridicule. Her clothes were often worn or hand-me-downs from her cousins. She did not have the latest shoes or fancy accessories that others flaunted. At lunch, while her peers shared homemade treats or exchanged snacks they had bought from the market, she quietly unwrapped her modest lunch, sometimes feeling a pang of embarrassment. She wished she could be like them, to have the freedom to wear bright colors, to carry pretty bags, to have friends who laughed with her instead of at her. But she held her head high, refusing to let shame define her completely. The worst moments were when she tried to speak up or share her thoughts. Her classmates would often interrupt her, laugh at her words, or roll their eyes. Even when she had a clever idea or noticed something important, Her voice seemed to vanish into the air, unheard. This only made her retreat further into herself, reinforcing the belief that being seen was dangerous, that being different meant being vulnerable. She started speaking less, smiling less, trying to make herself as small as possible so the world would leave her alone. Yet even in her loneliness, she found sparks of beauty. She loved the small things that others ignored, the way sunlight danced on the rooftops in the morning, the smell of rain on dusty streets, the gentle rhythm of leaves rustling in the wind. She would sometimes sit by the river near her home, watching the water flow and imagining it carrying her sadness away. She dreamed of a life where she could belong, where she could be appreciated for who she truly was, where her quiet heart would be seen as something valuable rather than strange. Her resilience was quiet but steady. Every night before going to sleep, she would tell herself that tomorrow could be different, that maybe someone would notice her acts of kindness, that maybe someone would laugh with her instead of at her. These thoughts became her shield, a small but powerful force that allowed her to survive each day of ridicule and neglect. Her dreams, though fragile, were filled with hope, because she believed that somewhere in the world there could be someone who would see her for what she truly was. One particularly cold morning, she walked to school, clutching her coat tightly around her. The wind whipped through the streets, and the laughter of children from a nearby playground made her shrink into herself. But as she passed, she noticed something unusual, a new face, someone who didn't laugh, didn't mock, but simply watched. He seemed different from the others, quiet, observant, and unhurried. She felt a strange flutter of curiosity mixed with cautious hope. Maybe, just maybe, this person would not see her as others did. Maybe he would notice her. The day went on, and she carried this thought quietly with her. Even when the usual teasing came, she clung to the idea that someone might see past the surface. Her heart, battered but unbroken, held onto that tiny glimmer of hope. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine that she might not always be invisible. That maybe, someday, someone would look at her and see a treasure rather than trash. In the evenings, she would return home and open her notebook. She wrote down her feelings, her dreams, the small moments of beauty she had noticed that day. Sometimes, she sketched little drawings, imagining herself in worlds where she was accepted, valued, and loved. These pages became her refuge, a silent witness to her struggles and her strength. They reminded her that even if the world mocked her, her worth was not defined by others' laughter. And so, day by day, she endured. She faced the whispers, the cruel jokes, and the stares. She carried her small acts of kindness quietly, hoping that one day they would matter. She clung to her dreams, to the hope that someone would notice her for who she truly was. Though the world treated her like trash, she refused to believe it herself. Deep inside, she knew that she had something precious to offer, even if nobody else could see it yet. And somewhere, not far away, he was watching, ready to see what everyone else missed. He did not yet know her, but he would soon discover the treasure that had always been hidden in plain sight. He had just moved to the town. Unlike the others, he wasn't interested in showing off or proving anything. He walked through the streets with quiet observation, noticing details most people overlooked. The way flowers leaned toward the sunlight, the laughter of children that was genuine, and the small acts of kindness that went unnoticed. When he first saw her, sitting quietly on the edge of the playground, he felt a strange pull. There was something different about her, something that stood out in a world full of noise and chatter. While others only saw her awkwardness and whispered cruel remarks, he saw a subtle grace in her movements. The way she offered her seat to a younger child, the gentle way she helped the elderly neighbor carry groceries, or how she carefully avoided stepping on the cracks in the dusty pavement. He noticed it all. Most people would have ignored her, but to him, she was already special. He didn't know her yet, but he felt a quiet admiration, the kind that grows slowly and steadily, without needing applause or recognition. He started paying attention to her from a distance. At first, it was just curiosity. He wondered why someone so gentle and kind seemed invisible to everyone else. He saw how the other children laughed at her, made fun of her clothes, and dismissed her presence. It didn't make sense to him. How could anyone fail to see the goodness she carried in her heart? Day after day, he noticed the little ways she endured the cruelty. She didn't fight back, she didn't lash out, she just kept being herself, quietly and bravely. That bravery, he realized, was rare. As the days passed, he began to find small ways to cross paths with her. Sometimes it was in the library, where he noticed her quietly reading a book in the corner. Sometimes it was in the park, where she would feed stray birds or help a lost child find their way. He started offering her small greetings, a nod, or a simple hello whenever their paths crossed. At first, she was cautious. She wasn't used to anyone treating her with respect without an ulterior motive, but his presence was different. It was genuine and unhurried. She began to notice that not everyone looked at her with judgment or laughter. Their first real conversation happened unexpectedly. She had dropped a notebook while rushing to class, and he picked it up. "This is yours," he asked, his voice calm and kind. She nodded, barely managing a small smile. "Thank you," she whispered. It was such a simple interaction, but for her, it was monumental. For the first time, someone had acknowledged her without mockery, without judgment. She felt a warmth in her chest that she had rarely experienced, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her for who she truly was. As days turned into weeks, their interactions became more frequent. He began asking her about the books she read, the stories she wrote in her notebook, and the little things she noticed in the world around her. She was hesitant at first, unsure how to respond to someone showing genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. But his patience was steady, gentle, and consistent. Slowly, she began to open up, sharing small details about her life, her dreams, and even her fears. He listened without interrupting, without judging, and without trying to change her. She noticed something remarkable about him. He never laughed at her, never dismissed her ideas, and never tried to make her feel small. He treated her words and actions with respect. Even when others continued to mock her, he stood apart, silently showing her that she was worthy of attention and care. His presence gave her courage, a quiet strength she hadn't felt before. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was powerful, and she found herself looking forward to seeing him each day. Their friendship grew in small, meaningful ways. They would walk together to the library, sit on the same park bench, and sometimes share a quiet lunch. During these moments, she realized that being around someone who truly valued her thoughts and actions was unlike anything she had experienced before. She began to believe that her kindness and quiet nature were not weaknesses, but gifts. And for the first time, she started to see herself through someone else's eyes, not as the odd one out, but as someone worth knowing and appreciating. He also began to notice her unique talents. Her drawings, once hidden in the pages of her notebook, were full of imagination and beauty. Her writing carried emotion and depth that surprised him. He encouraged her to share her work, to take small steps toward believing in her own abilities. At first, she was hesitant, fearing judgment and rejection. But his unwavering support gave her the confidence to try, to let her light shine, even if only in small ways. Despite the growing bond between them, the world around her remained cruel. The children who had mocked her before did not stop, and some even intensified their teasing, jealous of the attention she now received. But she no longer faced it alone. With him by her side, she felt a shield against their cruelty. She learned to smile in the face of mockery, to respond with calm, and to protect her own sense of self-worth. His presence was a quiet reminder that the opinions of those who could not see her value did not define her. He also shared small stories about his own life, revealing struggles he had faced in the past. This made her feel less alone, understanding that even people who seemed strong had their own battles. They bonded over shared experiences, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. She began to realize that connection wasn't about fitting in or being popular. It was about being seen and understood by someone who truly cared. One day, he surprised her with a small gift, a simple bookmark for her favorite book, decorated with a tiny drawing. She held it in her hands, her eyes wide with emotion. It was not expensive or extravagant, but it symbolized that someone noticed her interests, her passions, and her efforts. That small act of kindness meant more to her than anything the others had ever done, and in that moment she felt like someone finally believed in her. Their friendship continued to grow, built on trust, patience, and quiet understanding. She began to see the world differently, noticing beauty she had previously ignored. Flowers seemed brighter, birdsong sweeter, and the laughter of kind people more genuine. He had shown her that even in a world that could be harsh, there was goodness to be found, and that sometimes it came in the form of someone who simply saw her as she truly was. She also began to notice changes within herself. Her confidence, though still fragile, started to grow. She raised her hand in class more often, spoke up for herself in small ways, and even began to make tentative friendships with those who had previously ignored her. It was not easy, and the fear of rejection still lingered, but she now had someone in her life who reminded her that she was capable, strong, and deserving of respect. He never pressured her, never forced her to be someone she was not. Instead, he celebrated the small victories, the first time she shared a story, the first time she smiled at someone who had teased her, the first time she believed that she mattered. These moments, though simple, were monumental in her life. She realized that the world was not entirely cruel, that there were people who could recognize and appreciate her worth. Their bond became a source of quiet joy. She began to anticipate their conversations, their walks, and their shared moments. It was not a dramatic friendship, but it was steady, reliable, and full of care. She felt safe, seen, and valued, and that feeling was transformative. For the first time, she understood that being different was not a weakness, but a gift, and that someone who truly understood her could help her see that. Even as others continued to mock her, she no longer felt invisible. His admiration, respect, and kindness acted as a shield, allowing her to navigate the world with courage. She began to laugh more freely, to share her thoughts without fear, and to appreciate the small victories in her life. Each day she became more aware of her own strength, realizing that the laughter of others could not define her happiness or self-worth. He, in turn, found inspiration in her resilience. He admired the way she faced cruelty without losing her heart, the way she offered kindness even when it went unappreciated, and the quiet bravery she carried in her chest. Their connection was a two-way street. He lifted her, and she, in her own gentle way, inspired him to see the world with renewed hope and compassion. By the end of that year, something remarkable had happened. She had transformed, not because the world had changed, but because she had been seen. Seen by someone who recognized her value, respected her individuality, and celebrated her kindness. It was a quiet, profound change, one that gave her a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. And though she still faced challenges, she knew that with him by her side, she could face anything. Their friendship was no longer just a bond. It was a lifeline. It reminded her that being true to herself was never a mistake, that kindness and patience were powerful, and that even in a world full of judgment, someone could recognize the treasure that she had always been. And in that recognition, she found the first real spark of hope, the belief that her life could be different, that her heart could be cherished, and that perhaps one day she would not just be seen but truly valued. The seasons were changing, and with them her life began to feel different in ways she had never expected. The quiet boy who had first noticed her from afar was no longer just an observer. He had become a constant in her life, a presence she looked forward to every day. Their friendship had grown from small conversations and shared walks into something deeper, something that made her heart feel lighter and stronger at the same time. But even as their bond strengthened, life continued to test her patience and courage, reminding her that growth often comes hand in hand with challenges. One afternoon, as the autumn wind rustled the golden leaves along the streets, they found themselves sitting on their favorite park bench, sharing a quiet moment. She held her notebook on her lap, her fingers tracing the edges of the pages that contained her thoughts, stories, and sketches. He watched her with a gentle smile, admiring the way her mind seemed to dwell on beauty even when the world around her could be harsh. "You notice things others miss," he said softly. "It's amazing how you see the little details." She blushed slightly, not used to such praise. "I guess I just notice," she replied quietly. "Sometimes it feels like nobody else does." "Maybe they just haven't learned to see yet," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But you notice everything, and that makes you special." For the first time, she felt a warmth in her chest that went beyond simple friendship. His words were not just kind, they were understanding. They acknowledged her, not for what she looked like or how others treated her, but for who she truly was. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, and it made her realize that being seen in this way could be life-changing. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened in ways neither of them had expected. They began spending more time together outside of school, exploring quiet corners of the town, reading books under the shade of trees, and sharing stories about their dreams and fears. She began to confide in him about the cruelty she had faced, the mockery of classmates, and the loneliness that had followed her for so long. He listened with patience, never interrupting, never judging, simply offering understanding and support. One day, as they walked past the playground where she had once felt invisible, she noticed the same children who had mocked her before. Their laughter was loud and sharp, aimed to wound. For a brief moment, fear gripped her chest, the old insecurities threatening to return. But then she looked at him, standing beside her, calm and steady. His presence was a shield, and she felt courage flowing into her like a quiet river. She held her head high, walked past them with dignity, and realized that their words no longer had power over her. She had learned to stand tall, and it was the first taste of true strength. It was around this time that he began to notice her creativity in new ways. One afternoon, she showed him a story she had written, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the notebook. He read every word carefully, his expression changing from curiosity to admiration. "This is incredible," he said finally. "You have such a gift. Your words, they touch people." She looked down, embarrassed but proud. "I've always written in secret," she admitted. "I never thought anyone would care about my stories." "I care," he said simply, "and I think the world should too. You have something rare, don't hide it." His encouragement became a turning point. She started to share more of her work, first with him, then with a small group of trusted friends who began to appreciate her talent. Each time she took a step forward, her confidence grew. She realized that the same world that had laughed at her could also be a place where she belonged, where her gifts were seen and valued. But life was not without its struggles. Some classmates, jealous of her growing confidence and the attention she received from him, intensified their teasing. They whispered rumors, tried to embarrass her in class, and made it clear that they still saw her as someone to mock. At first, the old fear crept back, making her question herself and her abilities. But he stood beside her, reminding her of her worth. "You are stronger than their words," he said. "Their laughter doesn't define you. You define yourself." With his support, she began to confront the world differently. She no longer ran from ridicule. She faced it with calm and grace. She learned to smile in the face of mockery, to respond with quiet confidence rather than anger, and to protect her own sense of self-worth. Each small victory became monumental in her life, a raised hand in class, a shared story, a moment of laughter that was truly hers. As their friendship grew, so did their trust in one another. They shared secrets, dreams, and fears that they had never told anyone else. She learned about his past, the challenges he had faced, and the moments that had shaped him into the person he was. In turn, she opened her heart, revealing the parts of herself she had long hidden from the world. It was a bond built on honesty, respect, and a shared understanding that they could rely on each other. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves sitting by the window of a small cafe, watching the raindrops race down the glass. She held her notebook, unsure whether to share a story she had written about her struggles. "I don't know if it's good enough," she admitted softly. He shook his head gently. "It doesn't matter if it's good enough for others. It's good enough for you, and that's what matters. I want to read it because I want to know your thoughts, your heart." Encouraged by his words, she read aloud. Her voice trembled at first, but he listened attentively, offering smiles and gentle nods. By the time she finished, she felt a sense of relief and pride she had never known. He had helped her see that her voice mattered, that her perspective was valuable, and that sharing it could be a source of strength rather than fear. As weeks turned into months, she began to notice changes within herself. She laughed more freely, spoke up in class, and even began to make tentative connections with others who had once ignored her. She realized that she was not defined by the cruelty she had endured, but by the courage she displayed in rising above it. And through it all, he remained by her side, a constant source of encouragement, admiration, and unwavering belief in her potential. One day, as they walked along the riverside, she paused to look at her reflection in the water. For the first time, she did not see the timid, invisible girl she had once been. She saw someone strong, kind, and capable, a person who had survived mockery, loneliness, and doubt, and had emerged with a quiet strength that was remarkable. She turned to him, eyes wide with emotion, and whispered, "I don't know how to thank you for everything. You've changed the way I see myself." He smiled softly. "You've always had that strength inside you," he said. "I just helped you notice it, and I'll always be here to remind you of it." It was in that moment she realized something profound. He didn't just see her as someone who had been mocked or overlooked. He saw her for what she truly was, a treasure of kindness, creativity, and resilience. And for the first time, she began to see herself that way too. Their connection became a source of inspiration not only for her but for those around them. People began to notice her confidence, her talent, and the quiet courage she carried. Some who had once mocked her started to respect her, realizing that she was not someone to be dismissed or belittled. It was a slow change, but it was meaningful, and it reinforced the idea that patience, kindness, and support could transform even the most difficult circumstances. Through all these experiences, she learned an important lesson. The world might not always be kind, but finding someone who truly sees and values you can change everything. His presence was a reminder that she was worthy, capable, and deserving of love and respect. And in return, she inspired him to believe in the power of quiet strength and unwavering support. By the end of that chapter in her life, she had grown into a young woman who understood her own worth. She no longer feared ridicule, no longer doubted her abilities, and no longer questioned her value. She had discovered the transformative power of being seen, appreciated, and encouraged. And it all began with someone who refused to overlook her, someone who saw the treasure hidden in her heart even when the world laughed. And though life would continue to present challenges, she now faced them with courage, confidence, and the knowledge that true connection could light the darkest of paths. With him by her side, she realized that she could not only survive the cruelty of the world but rise above it, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Life, as she was beginning to learn, was not always smooth, even when she had someone by her side who believed in her. Her confidence had grown, her heart had opened, and she had begun to see herself as someone valuable. But the world still had challenges, and sometimes those challenges came in ways she did not expect. People who had once ignored or mocked her began to test her strength in new ways, jealousy and misunderstanding creating obstacles she would have to overcome. One day, a misunderstanding at school created tension. A group of students misinterpreted something she had said in a class discussion and began spreading rumors. Despite her efforts to explain, their whispers grew louder, and soon the laughter she had endured for years returned in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. For a moment, she felt her old fears creeping back, threatening to undo the progress she had made. She wondered if she would ever escape the shadow of mockery that seemed to follow her everywhere. He noticed her struggle immediately. Sitting beside her during lunch, he reached out and held her hand gently. "Don't let them take away what you've built," he said softly. "You've grown so much and their words don't matter. You know your worth." She looked at him, her eyes welling up with tears. I feel like I'm starting over again," she whispered. "Every time I try to move forward, someone pushes me back." He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Life will always test us, but it doesn't define us. You are stronger than this moment, and I'll be here every step of the way." His support gave her the courage to face the situation head-on. She spoke calmly to her teachers, explaining the misunderstanding and sharing her perspective. She addressed her classmates with confidence, correcting the rumors and standing firm in her truth. It was not easy, and she felt the weight of eyes upon her, some skeptical, some indifferent. But she discovered something important. Speaking her truth and standing tall, even in fear, was a powerful act. This experience also taught her the importance of boundaries. She realized that while kindness and patience were strengths, she did not have to endure cruelty or disrespect. She could protect herself without being unkind in return. He helped her understand that strength was not only about enduring, but also about asserting one's right to be treated with dignity. With his guidance, she navigated the conflict with grace, and slowly, the whispers lost their power. Meanwhile, their bond continued to deepen. They spent more time together outside school, exploring the town, visiting quiet cafes and sharing stories under the open sky. Each day, she learned more about him, his past struggles, his dreams, and the values he held dear. She admired his patience, his calm approach to life, and his ability to see the best in people, even when others failed to do so. And he, in turn, admired her resilience, her quiet determination, and the way she carried her heart in a world that often seemed harsh. One afternoon, as they walked along a narrow path by the river, she shared her fears about the future. "Sometimes I worry," she admitted. "Even with everything we've built, I'm afraid the world will never accept me, that I'll always be misunderstood." He stopped and looked at her, his expression serious but kind. "The world might not always accept you, and some people may never understand you. But that doesn't matter. What matters is how you see yourself, and how you allow those who truly care to support you. You are more than their opinions, more than their mockery. You are valuable, and no one can take that away." His words resonated deeply within her. She realized that the most important validation did not come from the world, but from within herself, and from those who genuinely cared for her. It was a turning point in her journey. She understood that self-worth was something she could nurture and protect, regardless of the obstacles around her. As the weeks passed, she faced new challenges that tested her resilience in different ways. Her creativity, once shared freely with a few friends, became the subject of envy among some classmates. They tried to belittle her work, making dismissive comments and attempting to discourage her from sharing it publicly. For a moment, doubt crept in, the old insecurities whispering that she was not good enough. But she remembered his support, his unwavering belief in her abilities, and she refused to let their words define her. Instead, she focused on her passion, pouring her heart into her stories, sketches, and small projects. Each piece of work became a testament to her perseverance, a reminder that her talent and effort were valuable, even if some refused to recognize it. She began sharing her creations with a wider audience, and slowly, people started to notice her genuine talent. Her confidence grew, not because the world praised her, but because she had learned to trust in her own abilities. During this time, he remained her anchor. He offered guidance without controlling, encouragement without pressure, and love without expectation. They supported each other in ways that were quiet but profound. She realized that true connection was not about constant drama or grand gestures, but about presence, understanding, and mutual respect. With him by her side, she felt capable of facing any challenge, no matter how daunting. One day, a particularly harsh encounter at school tested her courage once again. A group of students tried to embarrass her in front of the entire class, mocking her appearance and her work. She felt the familiar pang of fear, the instinct to shrink and retreat. But then she saw him in the crowd, his eyes steady and encouraging. In that moment, she made a choice. She stood tall, met their laughter with calm, and responded with dignity. She did not fight with anger or insults. She simply asserted her presence with confidence. The room grew silent, and for the first time, she realized that she no longer feared the judgment of others. This experience was transformative. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had faced ridicule, misunderstanding, and envy, and she had emerged stronger. Her resilience was not built in isolation. It was shaped by her experiences, her reflection, and the unwavering support of someone who truly valued her. As the months went by, she began to embrace her identity fully. She celebrated her uniqueness, recognizing that her quiet nature, her creativity, and her kindness were not flaws but strengths. She began to mentor younger students who faced similar struggles, offering guidance, encouragement, and a listening ear. She had learned firsthand the power of empathy, and she wanted to share that gift with others. Her relationship with him also deepened in new ways. They began to share dreams for the future, plans for education, creativity, and life beyond the small town. They spoke of traveling together, learning new skills, and continuing to support each other through life's challenges. Their connection was no longer just about friendship. It had become a partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual admiration. Even as they looked ahead, the challenges of the present continued to shape her. She faced moments of self-doubt, times when the world seemed unfair, and situations that tested her patience. But each obstacle became an opportunity for growth, a chance to reinforce the lessons she had learned. She understood that life would not always be easy, but with courage, perseverance, and the support of those who truly cared, she could overcome anything. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, she reflected on her journey. "I've come so far," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I never thought I could feel this way about myself. I used to believe that I was invisible, that no one could see my worth. But now I feel different. I feel strong." He smiled, taking her hand gently. "You've always had that strength inside you," he said. "I just helped you see it, and I'll always be here to remind you of it." It was in that moment she realized the depth of their bond. He had not only seen her for who she truly was, but he had also helped her recognize her own value. The laughter and mockery of the past no longer held power over her. She had grown into someone capable of facing the world with confidence, kindness, and courage. Through all the struggles, misunderstandings, and challenges, she had learned a vital truth. The world might not always be kind, but finding someone who truly sees and supports you can change everything. His belief in her had been a beacon of light, guiding her through darkness and helping her discover the treasure within herself. And as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, she knew that this was only the beginning. Life would continue to bring challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had found strength, courage, and love, and she had discovered that even in a world that could be cruel, she could rise above it with grace, dignity, and unwavering self-worth. By the time the final year of school approached, she had transformed in ways even she had once thought impossible. The girl who had been mocked, laughed at, and treated as invisible had grown into someone confident, compassionate, and quietly powerful. She carried herself with dignity, spoke her mind with calm assurance, and shared her gifts with those who valued them. The journey had been long, filled with trials and moments of self-doubt, but each struggle had shaped her into a young woman who understood her own worth. He had been there for every step of the way. Their friendship, once a quiet connection built on shared moments, had grown into a profound partnership of trust, respect, and love. He continued to see her as a treasure, and in turn, she recognized the rare and gentle presence he had brought into her life. Together, they had navigated the challenges of ridicule, jealousy, and misunderstanding, learning lessons about courage, resilience, and the importance of support. The world around her had not changed completely. Some people still whispered, some still judged, and others failed to see the value in things that were not loud or obvious. But she no longer relied on their approval. She had learned the most important lesson of all. Self-worth comes from within, nurtured by belief in oneself and reinforced by the care of those who truly matter. The mockery that had once seemed crushing now felt distant and insignificant. She had grown too strong, too confident, and too aware of her own value to let it affect her. One afternoon, as she walked through the school courtyard, she noticed a small group of students gathered around a younger girl, whispering and laughing in the same way she had once been treated. The sight tugged at her heart. She remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the quiet pain of being mocked. Without hesitation, she approached the girl and gently intervened. She offered a kind word, a listening ear, and a comforting presence. Slowly, the girl relaxed, her fear replaced with gratitude. He watched her from a distance, smiling softly. This was the moment he had known would come, her courage and compassion extending beyond herself, reaching others who needed it. She had not only transformed her own life, but had begun to impact the lives of those around her in meaningful ways. The treasure he had seen in her long ago was now shining brightly for the world to notice. Her creative talents, once hidden in secret notebooks and sketches, had begun to gain recognition. Teachers praised her work, classmates who had once doubted her offered respect, and small local exhibitions showcased her stories and drawings. Yet despite the acknowledgement, she remained humble, knowing that her value was not determined by fame or accolades, but by the kindness, effort, and authenticity she carried in her heart. He continued to encourage her in all her endeavors, celebrating each achievement, no matter how small. Together, they explored new ideas, shared books and experiences, and envisioned a future filled with possibilities. She began to see herself not only as someone who had survived hardship, but as someone capable of thriving, creating, and inspiring others. Each day, her confidence grew, anchored in the understanding that she was worthy of love, respect, and recognition. One evening, as they sat on a hill overlooking the town, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink by the setting sun, she reflected on her journey. "I can hardly believe how far I've come," she said softly. "There was a time when I thought I would always be invisible, when I thought no one could ever see my worth." He took her hand gently. "You've always had worth," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you, and more importantly, you needed to believe it yourself. Look at you now. You're strong, kind, creative, and brave. You've become everything you were meant to be." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization of her growth. For the first time, she truly understood that the journey itself had shaped her into a person capable of facing the world with courage and grace. The laughter of the past, the whispers, and the ridicule could no longer hold power over her. She had discovered the treasure within herself, a treasure that had been there all along, waiting to be recognized and nurtured. Their bond had also blossomed into something deeper than friendship. There was a quiet love between them, built on trust, understanding, and unwavering support. It was not dramatic or hurried. It was steady, reliable, and profound. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, had supported each other through challenges, and had celebrated each other's strengths. In each other's presence, they found safety, encouragement, and joy. As she prepared to graduate, she felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia. She would leave the school that had once been a place of fear and ridicule, a place that had tested her courage and resilience. But she would carry the lessons, friendships, and growth she had achieved into the next chapter of her life. She had learned that challenges were not meant to break her, but to help her discover the strength, patience, and compassion within herself. The graduation ceremony was filled with celebration and reflection. As she walked across the stage to receive her certificate, she felt a sense of pride unlike anything she had known. Her classmates who had once mocked her now looked at her with respect, and some even approached her to offer congratulations. She smiled politely, recognizing that while some had changed, her true validation came from within and from those who had supported her along the way. After the ceremony, she and he walked together through the familiar streets of their town. They spoke of the future, of dreams yet to be realized, and of the adventures they hoped to share. She felt a sense of freedom and possibility, knowing that she was no longer defined by the opinions of others but by her own choices, actions, and heart. In the months that followed, she pursued her passions with determination. She continued writing, drawing, and sharing her work, inspiring others with her creativity and kindness. She volunteered to mentor younger students, helping them navigate challenges similar to those she had faced. Her life had become a testament to resilience, compassion, and the power of being seen and valued. Through it all, he remained her partner, her supporter, and her friend. Together, they celebrated successes, faced challenges, and found joy in the simple moments of life. Their bond was a constant reminder that true connection, built on trust, understanding, and respect, could transform even the most difficult experiences into opportunities for growth and happiness. One quiet evening, as they sat by the river watching the water flow, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the girl she had once been, the girl who had been mocked, laughed at, and treated as invisible, and she realized how far she had come. She had discovered courage, self-worth, and the importance of genuine connection. She had learned that the world might not always be kind, but with resilience, support, and belief in oneself, she could overcome any challenge. He looked at her with admiration and love. "You are remarkable," he said softly, "not because of what others think, but because of who you are. You've faced hardships, grown through them, and become someone extraordinary." She smiled, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment she had never known. "And I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You helped me see the treasure inside myself, even when I couldn't see it." In that moment, they understood something profound. Life would continue to present challenges, but they had learned to face them together, with courage, kindness, and unwavering support. She had grown into a young woman who could navigate the world with confidence and compassion, and he had discovered the joy of witnessing and supporting someone truly remarkable. Her story became an inspiration to others, proof that even when the world laughs at you, overlooks you, or underestimates your value, there is hope. There are people who will see you, believe in you, and help you recognize your own worth. And most importantly, there is a strength within yourself that, once discovered, can carry you through any trial. As the sun set on that chapter of her life, she felt gratitude, pride, and hope. Gratitude for the support she had received, pride in the courage she had discovered within herself, and hope for the future that lay ahead. She had learned that being treated like trash by some did not define her value. The love, belief, and respect of those who truly saw her, combined with her own inner strength, had revealed the treasure she had always been. And with him by her side, she knew that she would continue to grow, thrive, and shine. The laughter of the past no longer mattered. The whispers of judgment no longer held power. She had found herself, and she had found someone who valued her true self. Together, they would face the world, carrying with them the lessons of resilience, courage, and the power of being truly seen and appreciated. Her story ended not with a dramatic triumph, but with something far more meaningful. A life transformed by love, belief, and the realization that true worth is discovered within and cherished by those who recognize it. She had emerged from darkness into light, not just surviving but thriving, not just existing but shining brightly. She had become the treasure he had seen all along, and now she truly saw it herself.